Welcome everyone to Kick Discussions presented by Sportskeeda. I'm your host Korey Gunz, along with wrestling expert Tom Colohue, and it's been another eventful week in the world of wrestling. It seems like we can never be disappointed when it comes to things to talk about on the each week, right, Tom?
Absolutely, it's crazy how much wrestling there is, but there's always something worth talking about, and right now there seems to be a lot to talk about in the build to WrestleMania.
Absolutely, this week's no different, and speaking of things to talk about, we'll also be giving you listeners something that we hope that you'll enjoy. We'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of the show, but Tom and I have got some ideas for maybe some fan engagement and getting you listeners involved in the show, and if that's something that piques your interest, I invite you to make sure you stay tuned until the end of the show this week, and we'll talk to you about how you can get involved and what Tom and I do here each and every week here on Dropkick Discussions. But let's first talk about the world of wrestling, and we'll start with Monday Night Raw. We got a couple of unique developments going on there. We had the big 8-man main event tag match that went down. A interesting, I guess would be the word maybe to use, segment between Becky Lynch and Shayna Baszler show. So let's go ahead and start there with Lynch and Baszler. Baszler comes out, attacks Becky in a way that I can admit that I've never seen before, biting the back of the neck and drawing blood, and then Becky drives herself to the hospital, I guess because she doesn't want anybody else to drive her ambulance, so she hides herself, takes herself to the hospital, returns to give a little promo. Some of the logic I'm not exactly sure lined up, or I wasn't exactly sure what they were kind of going for in that area, but I have to admit that the attack by Baszler definitely took me off guard, and especially the manner. What did you think about this build-up to what we believe will probably be the Women's Championship match at WrestleMania between Becky Lynch and Shayna Baszler?
Well, it's like you say, it was a very strange segment, very out of the ordinary, and in a way of the way that WWE markets itself. It wants to reach as many eyes as possible. So having something that's guaranteed to get a lot of social media engagement, like literally biting someone in the back of the neck, is a good way to do that. Even though it's really not something I would ever have related to Shayna Baszler. It's very clear because obviously there is a very different writing team to NXT and how she's been presented there, to Raw and how she's been presented there. So there is clearly an idea to present her in a different way, an animalistic fighter in that regard, more of a hunter, which is interesting and something that hasn't really been seen. I know Sarah Logan essentially tried to build in the hunter gimmick, and I think it's something she could work with, but this is very, very different level. So it definitely drew the eye. It was definitely very interesting. Now, we've been talking about Becky and Baszler for a long time, since I think around the time we started talking about Becky and Asuka back in December. You and I have been talking about that one since, because Becky and Baszler, they really teased it at Survivor Series, even in the build-up when they sat down across from each other. But that was an NXT writer writing it, whereas this is not. It's a different presentation. The bite was strange. Walking away afterwards was strange in that she's not returned to attack Becky later in the night when Becky did come back. But the ambulance section was strange. Why would she refuse to go to hospital and then drive herself to the hospital and then come back from the hospital? That was confusing to me, and maybe too many writers writing one segment. What they need to do is maybe have one writer writing this feud rather than maybe too many voices going on there. And then I've got to say the highlight of it for me was like the promo. When she returned, and I just want to make a quick shout out, Becky and Asuka, that match was incredible. But in everything that happened afterwards, when she returned, the promo was exceptional. It really drew all your focus back to where it was supposed to be. It's very clear that Becky is going to challenge Baszler to a match at WrestleMania rather than the other way around. But they've got to kill a little bit of time because they don't want to do it all at Elimination Chamber.
Yeah, you mentioned that, this Becky Baszler feud seems to have been playing very early on, going all the way back to Survivor Series and, the build up to that. So it seems like we will eventually get that match at WrestleMania. So let's fast forward a little bit and let's say we get Shayna and Becky at WrestleMania. Is there a potential, with Shayna being built up as this, as you said, this animalistic, very aggressive, obviously type of competitor, that she could be the type of person to be built up that could topple Becky, that could actually take the belt from her at WrestleMania, and then maybe kind of buy some time, maybe going into the summer, because I know that you told me that there's some rumors swirling around that maybe Becky, along with her fiance Seth Rollins, could maybe be looking to take some time off after WrestleMania.
It's definitely possible, and I personally think it's likely that Shayna Baszler will come out of WrestleMania as a Raw Women's Champion. I said war there, and I don't know why. In the conference call earlier on with Triple H, he did that Shayna Baszler was still technically an NXT talent, but she was appearing on Raw in the same way that Rhea Ripley is appearing on Raw. So the only way to make her very much concrete on Raw is to make her the Raw Women's Champion. There's no one else left for Becky. At this point to WrestleMania, we're talking a year-long title reign. There are subsections of the fan base that are starting to turn and starting to think that she's overpushed. One way to sort of re-achieve parity is to have her lose at WrestleMania in what we know is not going to be the main event. So it's not the big send people home happy moment. She doesn't need to win, and she doesn't really lose anything in a loss. And yet there are rumors now that both her and Seth are starting to of taking some time away after WrestleMania to recharge, maybe go and get married, and to let the fans breathe a little bit, because absence does make the heart grow fonder. So we'll see if that happens. That is only what I hear, so it's nothing concrete at the moment. I want to make that very clear, but it is what I'm starting to hear. So it would make sense for Becky to lose the title at WrestleMania, and I think Baszler would be a very good heel champion, because there are a lot of faces at the minute, and there are a lot of people who could be very much built up by challenging Shayna Baszler.
Now, over on the NXT side, we also saw NXT Women's Champion Rhea Ripley come out and continue her program with Charlotte Flair, what appears to be, again, a program with Charlotte Flair. It looks like that may be the match that we get for the NXT Women's Championship at WrestleMania. And for all the outrage and backlash that Charlotte Flair seemed to get when she won the Royal Rumble, I don't think anyone really thought about the possibility of the fact that she may actually end up fighting Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania. And if you presented that idea to those same people that seemed to be upset that Charlotte won the Rumble, they would probably be for it. So if we do get Charlotte, Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, has this been the plan from the beginning? Has this been a little bit of a pivot because of that backlash about Charlotte winning the Rumble? What can you tell us about the build-up between these two?
First off, I've been waiting to see Charlotte Flair against Rhea Ripley for what feels like forever. I'm talking before Rhea Ripley moved to NXT from NXT UK. I've always wanted this match, so I'm very excited. I've known Rhea Ripley for a long time. Obviously, living in the UK, I have a lot more experience of her because of her time in the NXT UK roster, but also the Mae Young Classic. She was my favourite of the Mae Young Classic. Her match against Dakota Kai was a masterpiece watching again. When it comes to Charlotte Flair, the plan was changed quite late in the day. We're talking 2, maybe 1 week before the Royal Rumble, because everything was built to the idea of Shayna Baszler versus Becky Lynch, including Rhea Ripley winning the NXT Championship. That was done to free up Baszler so that Baszler could move on. What they didn't account for was the success, particularly with fans, of Rhea Ripley. They knew she was going to be great, but she was a heel when she moved to NXT. Didn't realise just how popular she would be, and they kept leaning into it, and people kept responding. At this point, it became an option when you're pushing NXT, when you're trying to get NXT matches onto the WrestleMania card. The intention was to have Baszler as the NXT representative, but now they can do more. This is why Charlotte had to win, so that she can have that option of challenging Ripley. Ripley can potentially do double duty. She may end up defending the title on the takeover WrestleMania, but it's also possible, of course, as Charlotte alluded to, that she won't be the champion come that point. I don't think we'll see a triple threat, even though that is a very exciting prospect between 3 of the probably the strongest women in the company. I think it'll be very clean, Charlotte versus Rhea Ripley, and I think it'll be a tremendous match.
Let's move over to the main event of the evening that we saw. Again, I talked about the 8-man tag match between Seth Rollins and his new faction, his disciples of the AOP and Murphy. And of course, and make sure you refer to him correctly. It is just Murphy now, no longer Buddy Murphy for whatever reason. Against
Big Murph.
against the Viking Raiders and a returning Samoa Joe. Now, there was some question about Samoa Joe's status just a couple weeks ago. We saw that he got taken out of the match for medical reasons for what was described as a concussion. But we talked about on the show last week that then there was this rampant speculation that he had failed a wellness policy, that he was actually going to be suspended following that, and this was somewhat of a storyline to get him off of television for that suspension. We talked about on the show, and you gave us the report that that was not the case. You even outlined his return schedule. And actually, this past Monday, he seemed to return a little bit ahead of schedule where we thought he may be. But, you did confirm that there was no wellness policy failure, and obviously his return this past month confirms that. What could you tell us, though, about his return schedule and maybe the effect that rumor of the wellness policy violation, the effect that rumor had on the timetable for his in-ring return?
Spoke about this right after the injury 2 weeks ago, where I said that he had been taken out, he'd been checked, and he'd been removed from the match, but he didn't seem to show any signs of actual injury. Now, it's certainly possible there may have been a mild concussion. Even the most mild concussions at the moment, you're not seeing people come straight back. That's just not something that's happening. What was explained to me was that he got a stinger and he got shaken up, but he would be back soon. But the reality was needed in the story at that point. And in fact, a week away is beneficial to that storyline because it creates that everyone against Kevin Owens mentality that they really built on. You can see how smartly they've used that in the Raws that followed. They could have made that happen for a bit longer, but there was a pressure on them to prove the rumour wrong. And unfortunately, to my knowledge, Samoa Joe himself was also aware of that rumour and wanted to get back and in action. Now, if seriously concussed, someone like Samoa Joe, who just loves to be in the action, we're then putting them in a position whereby Joe is trying to force himself back ahead of schedule to prove people wrong. It's not the right thing, and it's very unfortunate, but the wrestling Twitter account, which initially reported it, have since recanted it and said, I got it wrong, held their hands up, I'm sorry, fair enough. That does happen in the wrestling journalism world. That is fair enough. We will see going from here. To my knowledge, it was supposed to be a surprise this week that he returned, but they did have to announce it ahead of time to sort of clear up the rumours and say, hey, it's not a thing. Stop spreading rumours.
Now, a lot of what we've been seeing recently on Raw has been build up for the Super Showdown in Saudi Arabia. Outside of really Drew McIntyre's continued push, things have kind of taken a little bit away from WrestleMania build to a lot of the storylines are building up to Super Showdown at the end of the month in Saudi Arabia. And one thing that I thought was pretty interesting we saw was a graphic for the Tawake Trophy Gauntlet match at Super Showdown. It's going to be a gauntlet match. I guess it's kind of similar to the Greatest Royal Rumble, that they have where the winner is going to, and also the World's Greatest Tag Team Tournament where the winner of this match is going to get a nice trophy, and it's, a feature attraction on the Saudi Arabia show. But what I thought was interesting was on the match, it included two wrestlers that we haven't seen in the past couple weeks but seemingly confirmed their returns for this show, one being Andrade, who right now is serving a wellness policy violation suspension, but also AJ Styles, who was injured at the Royal Rumble. Haven't really heard a whole lot of updates about him on Raw itself, but we see him pictured in the graphic for this match, so it appears that he will be making his return and be healthy enough to wrestle in Saudi Arabia as well. Anything that you can add on about this match itself or the seemingly confirmed returns of both Andrade and AJ Styles at Super Showdown?
There's actually a lot of different moving parts here. Firstly, I did confirm right after the report of the wellness policy from Andrade that he would be back in time for Super Showdown. I did mention that on Twitter. It is literally the day he returns. And I suspect this is why he was removed from TV when he was. If you'll remember back at Battleground, I think it was 2015? No, 16, sorry. When it was a Shield triple threat and Roman Reigns just beforehand appeared on a Raw after Money in the Bank and then was immediately suspended for 30 days so that they had footage to build to their triple threat match, but in the triple threat match. So they're quite clever about when they actually suspend people. So Andrade will be back. There will be no championship on the line, which is probably a good thing because I doubt he's going to be winning, especially after returning from a wellness policy violation. But it's perfectly within his timescale, perfectly within his timetable. It also gives them an opportunity, if they so decide, to have another woman feature on the card, in that Zelina Vega can appear as sort of Lashley at the last show, appear at the top of the ramp, introduce her client, and then go back again. Lana did that last year. There was eventually a women's match, but they didn't know for certain it was happening, so they wanted to get a woman visible. Lana was going to be that woman, and they had all three women featured. When it comes to AJ Styles, we haven't heard anything in a while. To my knowledge, he is not cleared yet, but he is expected to be cleared. He is recovering well. That's good news. Very glad to hear he'll be coming back. I am missing him from Raw a little bit, because with Raw this good, it's unfortunate that we're missing probably the best wrestler in the world, in my opinion, at least. One final point to make. We haven't seen for a while two of the men in this match lock horns. That will be Lashley and Rusev. They will both be in this match. It'll be interesting to see if they engage, as I suspect they might. It will also be quite telling about a new contract, because if he takes that trophy, you can be certain he signed something.
Yeah, if you listen to our past week's show, we had a pretty long discussion about Rusev's contract situation. I would agree with you. This could be the signs of good things if he were to come out on top of this match, or at least have a good showing, or maybe this is just his last big payday before he walks out the door. So that would be interesting how it unfolds. I know obviously what side of the coin you're rooting for.
I can't hide my love, okay? Just let me be a passionate man who wants Rusev to succeed. Just let me have it. And he will, as we know. He'll sign with the company. He'll beat The Fiend at WrestleMania. He was supposed to win the Royal Rumble. It was a blip. They'll rewrite it. Rusev will take the championship, beat The Fiend, and he will reign supreme for the next 27 years. We know how it's supposed to go.
I'm really rooting for you, buddy. I really am. I gotta tell you. Let's move on. Another happening on Raw, but I think it was big enough to kind of give it its own segment, was the angle between Randy Orton and Matt Hardy, and what may be the last appearance we may see from Matt Hardy. We know that there's been a lot of rumors and a lot of social media interaction with Matt Hardy that would seem to say that he is finishing up with the company. We've heard that his contract is up soon. He appears to maybe not be very happy with how he's been used lately, with the creative direction or the creative freedom that he's given. It would seem like that this may have been kind of a way to write him not only off of television, but essentially write him out of the company for the time being. He comes down to confront Randy Orton, talks about his history with Edge. The promo that he gave, not the best promo, and Matt Hardy never really has been known as a promo guy. But I do think the line that he included in there was telling when he referenced Edge and was talking about how it would feel to have all of this, meaning his wrestling career, taken away from him when he wasn't ready. And he was referencing Edge in that, but I feel like there was also a little bit of reality and a little bit of a shoot, if you would, when reflecting about his own situation, and thought that maybe he is being pushed out of the company, or like I said, just not giving the opportunities that he would like to see. So I thought that was really interesting that line was included in his promo. And then we also saw him post what looked like a Twitter video on Twitter. And you never know with Matt Hardy. You never know if this is reality, if it could be, storyline. Obviously he's very creative. He's always used social media and those types of platforms to kind of push his character and push his storyline. But what did you take from that segment? Did it feel like to you that this was the last time that we would see Matt Hardy for a while in a WWE ring?
It did. It felt very similar to me to when Dean Ambrose was essentially run the WWE by Drew McIntyre in the build to McIntyre Reigns last year at WrestleMania. And what he was saying was essentially completely true. He and Edge have really reconciled. Matt Hardy was incredibly happy to see Edge back in the ring. I've been lucky enough to have brief conversations with Matt Hardy and just really connected a little bit. I've met the man. I doubt he actually remembers it, but it was quite a long time ago. And he bears Edge no ill will. All of that has happened a very long time ago for most of it. He was always very keen for Edge, if he did return, to be able to go out on his own terms, which is something he referenced as well in the promo. And he wants to be able to work on his own as well. I do see Matt Hardy moving on. I think he's done everything he can in the WWE. But in addition to that, there's also a number of other possibilities which do involve him staying in the company. I recently had the idea of Matt going to NXT, and he was a fan of that tweet. So I'd love to see him and Velveteen Dream run a tag team called The Broken Dream. And there are a number of ideas, and yeah, I thought so. He's a very creative man. He will go wherever he needs that creativity. We may see him back in Impact, where he was obviously treated very well. We may see him in AEW, where he is teasing. But wherever he goes, Matt Hardy will be a very big deal. You can count on that.
Does his current situation have any effect on Jeff Hardy's situation with WWE? We know that Jeff, he was injured. He's also had a little bit of legal trouble while he's been on the injured reserve list and kind of out of action. If Matt Hardy does leave, do you think that has any impact on Jeff, either on the side of the WWE being, maybe somewhat hesitant to use him, or maybe in the way that they use him, or any impact on Jeff himself when he come back to the WWE by himself? Him and Matt were brought back into the company together, at that big WrestleMania return. So they were brought back together. Would Jeff maybe have some second thoughts about returning to the WWE without Matt if Matt goes on his way, or maybe if he does end up in AEW or Impact? Would Jeff rather be in the same company as his brother as opposed to coming back to the WWE solo again?
When it comes to Jeff, there's a lot of history repeating itself. The WWE have always been confident they to push Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy always had a bit more of a rapport with the fans, even though I personally felt that Matt Hardy was the better wrestler in that regard. But when it comes to sports entertainment, Jeff Hardy is your guy. He does all the flips and everything like that, and he has there. He's an incredibly interesting character, and the more you learn about him, the more you want to learn about him. He's one of those. So the WWE always wanted to push him, but as they pushed him, they started to realize that Jeff Hardy, unfortunately, has a lot of demons. When they brought he and Matt back, the idea for the tag team was that they didn't want to just bring Jeff back, but Jeff was the one they really wanted. They didn't really want to bother with the Broken Universe, even though they were eventually into it. They didn't really fancy that. They wanted Jeff Hardy, and they brought Matt Hardy to be sort of a chaperone. The idea being that with Matt there, Jeff's more wild impulses would be a bit more tempered. That has not proven to be the case. It'll be interesting now because, to my knowledge, Jeff Hardy will happily return, and once he is fit and ready to go, we will see him again, and there will be storylines, and he'll be doing death-defying stunts. I remember his feud with Randy Orton recently in Hell in a Cell. Apart from that one section, the one. So I think Jeff will be someone we see again soon. But when I talk about history repeating itself, Jeff gets a solo push and then he goes and finds Matt. That's how it's always been. He goes so long without his brother and then he misses his brother. And I can't blame him for that. I don't think those two men will finish their wrestling careers with the WWE. But I do think they're surefire Hall of Fames in the future.
Oh, no question about that. We'll definitely see the Hardy Boys go in the Hall of Fame. And probably more likely, to your point, we'll probably see them go in together as the Hardy Boys. No matter, despite how much the WWE has seemed to want to push Jeff as the single star and, has underappreciated Matt for the type of performer he is and the type of creative juices that flow through his brain and the ideas that he has. I think in the end, they'll probably go into the Hall of Fame as a tag opposed to individuals. And I think that's a testament to the fact that, this is probably a group when you've kind of got the best of both worlds. You've got the charisma of Jeff. You've got the creativeness and the in-ring technical aspect of Matt. And these were two guys that maybe try as hard as they might, better together than they were as individuals.
I agree with that. As talented as they both are individually, I think they would want to go in as a unit. Their best work for me has been as a unit, even though I have fond memories of, for example, Jeff Hardy Slunk in ladder matches, or in Matt's entire feud of Edge. That was a really good feud. They are great memories, but really when it comes to these two men, they've always been a package unit. They cannot be on their own without them too long. They've just never been able to do it. So I think that day will come. They have been discussed before as potentially going into the Hall of Fame, but they just kept wrestling and kept wrestling and kept wrestling. I'm sure they'll be revisited. I'm sure we'll see it.
Definitely keep an eye on social media and the like, and also I'm sure Tom will keep us updated on what might leak out concerning Matt Hardy's status. One thing that has apparently already leaked out, though, is the main event for Elimination Chamber. The local advertisement that ran in the local markets for Elimination Chamber that supposedly have advertised the main event Elimination Chamber match as being involving Roman Reigns, Braun Strowman, Baron Corbin, Shinsuke Nakamura, Daniel Bryan, and Robert Roode. And you would assume that this match would probably be for the number one contendership to the WWE Championship for WrestleMania. So the winner of this would go on to face either The Fiend or Goldberg, depending on what happens at Super Showdown, which we're out here in just a couple minutes. But Tom, tell me, if this does in fact go down the way that it's advertised, you would think that the going thought would be that Roman Reigns will come out on top here. We've seen this type of thing before as far as local market ads, maybe advertising events and advertising matches ahead of time to try to increase ticket sales before it's officially announced. So, and we know that Elimination Chamber has been a match where we have seen substitutions and things maybe not quite go as planned. Most famously, probably Kofi Kingston, taking Ali's place in the last Elimination Chamber, and we saw how that turned out for Kofi. So, if this is the match that they're planning, any heat or anyone in WWE probably upset right now about the fact that this match has leaked out early, or have we reached a point where it's just kind of, hey, we're trying to increase ticket sales, we're in the social media era, it's going to get out one way or another anyway, it's kind of business as usual? Okay.
Firstly, it has been confirmed based on the adverts that were shown that it would be for number one contendership to the Universal Championship. I also want to say Universal Championship, whereas you said WWE, they are now two separate champions, so I made that clear which one we're going for.
My fault.
It's fine, I just want to make that clear. So when it comes to, yes, we have seen this before, whereby venues will advertise for matches that won't eventually happen as a way of sales, or maybe will be a dark match if it's a Raw or a SmackDown. What we don't see much of is TV adverts advertising it. What we got in the Philadelphia area, a TV advertisement advertising this match. It looks very likely that this match will happen. It's also consistent with previous years, whereby Roman Reigns, for example, has pinned Braun Strowman to become the number one contender after the Elimination Chamber match before, and that's how he ended up going against Brock Lesnar 2 years ago and losing and being destroyed. That was such a weird match. But anyway, there are a couple of question marks about some of the talent in the match. For example, why Robert Roode and not Dolph Ziggler? That's one of the questions I would have. However, when it comes to everyone else, it kind of makes perfect sense, and I mean perfect sense, for this match to happen. There's still an outside possibility that Braun Strowman could win it, but now that he's won the Intercontinental Championship, that looks very unlikely. Roman Reigns seems to be the guy. That makes sense. We've talked about it on here. Roman Reigns versus Fiend has been in the work for a long time. It's always possible something will change near the last minute. But even if we don't get this exact match, I'm still confident Roman Reigns will win the Elimination Chamber match and lose to the Fiend at WrestleMania.
Yeah, it was interesting, the combatants, and like we said, there always could be substitutions made, but I'm with you. I think everything makes sense. I was kind of glad to see Robert Roode in there, maybe get a little bit of a push, and Shinsuke as well, I think, was a name that obviously it makes sense with his feud with Strowman, but again, I'm a fan of Shinsuke, and so I'd like to see him get any type of moment to shine, and maybe this could be something that he could really stand out and something unique in this match.
And I would love to have Nakamura and Bryan start the match. Just give them 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I'd be there for that. So we should, I've said before in the show, the WWE needs to hire us on their creative team. I've said it before, and if you don't believe me, we talked just last week about Goldberg returning to SmackDown and who may challenge him or who he may challenge for his big matches at SmackDown. And we went through a list of possible opponents for him. I stress that word, possible opponents. But your boy Korey Gunz said if the WWE had the guts, the person they should put Goldberg up against is The Fiend. Have Fiend take out Goldberg in about 2 minutes. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we've got. Goldberg versus Bray Wyatt, The Fiend, at Super Showdown. And I saw some comments to some of our posts on the Sportskeeda Twitter handle and the Dropkick DiSKussions Twitter handle that we're talking about a lot of fans thinking that they booked themselves into a corner, that, you know, you can't have The Fiend lose, but you've got to keep Goldberg strong. And so they've kind of backed themselves into a corner about, you know, what are they going to do with this match, and people are already expecting it to be a letdown. I think the total opposite. Like I talked about on the show last week, I think they haven't booked themselves into a corner. The only thing that they should do in this match is ring the bell, the spear, takes a jackhammer, kicks out at 1, pops up, and then nails Goldberg with the Sister Abigail and the Mandible Claw and puts Goldberg away in 2 minutes and just sets him, you know, up for WrestleMania, puts him up as an enhancer. And Goldberg's a guy that you can always heat back up. You know, The Fiend takes him down in Saudi Arabia. He goes away for a couple months, bring him back for SummerSlam. He runs over somebody new like he did Dolph Ziggler last year. You know, Goldberg will be fine. It's not going to be a big deal. So, to me, I don't think they back themselves into a corner. I'm just hoping that they actually pull off the one outcome and the one booking that I think makes the most sense and is the most logical, which is The Fiend to take down Goldberg. What did you think whenever this match was officially announced on SmackDown last week, and what would you like to see go down at Super Showdown as far as the way that they approach the booking for this match?
Well, a little history plays into this. Obviously, we're all well Undertaker and Goldberg had a very bad match in Saudi Arabia. All the fans know it. All the WWE know it. The Undertaker and Goldberg know it. And this is one of the reasons Goldberg wanted his match with Dolph Ziggler. He got his match, but I suspect part of getting that a little bit of negotiation about how he would then go out for the next match. He's definitely going on his back, and he seems very happy about that. We know Goldberg matches don't last very long, so I suspect it's going to go almost exactly as you have described it. I don't think it'll be 2 minutes. I think it'll be more like 5, maybe 6. Bray Wyatt will take maybe a couple more spears and just keep getting up, because that seems to be their MO. Goldberg will probably take a bit more beating than one Sister Abigail, but it's going to be quite brief, quite conclusive, and really, this is a very good thing for The Fiend, because there aren't really any more good guys to run over on SmackDown. We've talked about this for a while. He needs new opponents, but they want to get him on every pay-per-view, whereas maybe they're not trying to get Brock Lesnar on every pay-per-view. So it's a good match, it's a good matchup, and it's someone that Wyatt can very effectively put down, monster, and then move on. I really don't see Goldberg taking the championship. That serves literally no one. But I do see The Fiend winning this one.
Yeah, and let's stay on the subject of SmackDown. They had Goldberg come back. You know, last week we've seen some various returns from guys like The Undertaker on the show. Seems like they've been getting a lot of those big return segments since they've made the move over to Fox. And then we got this week that John Cena will be returning to SmackDown on February 28th. He will be there and making his return to the WWE. You would have to think that this has something to do with the build-up to WrestleMania. Now, what that role at WrestleMania is probably to be seen, at least until February 28th. Cena has gone on record in interviews lately saying that he would love to be at WrestleMania at whatever role Vince McMahon needs him in. So whether that's an in-ring role, whether it's just there to make an appearance as an ambassador, Cena seems down to do whatever the chairman thinks would best serve the company at WrestleMania. And, you know, Cena's always been, you know, one of those good soldiers for the company. And so I'm sure that he is agreeable to whatever Vince McMahon says. What do you make of when we see Cena return on February 28th? What's your speculation? Do you think that he will get a WrestleMania match If so, with who? Or do you think it may be a little bit of a lesser non-role for the show?
I was made aware in December that John Cena was not booked for a match at WrestleMania. And I posted, well, I say I posted that. I made that part of my YouTube video that I did shortly afterwards. And that was the case then. Cena's been campaigning quite openly to get on the card since then. And it seems like he may be succeeding. However, I'm not sure this particular appearance is relating to that. Yes, there are possibilities. John Cena has always been open about who he is. And I want to say the examples are he would really like to work with Elias. We've seen him work with Elias on a number of occasions for 2 straight WrestleManias. There has been engagement between Cena and Elias. But Cena also really likes working with Baron Corbin. And when you can backlash that Corbin got for being announced to face Kurt Angle last year instead of John Cena, it's been alluded to me that John Cena feels like he kind of owes Baron Corbin. So I think Baron Corbin might be favourite to face Cena at WrestleMania. A good match, I feel, even though they have faced each other at SummerSlam many moons ago. When it comes to this appearance, though, my theory is not WrestleMania related. My theory is based on the fact that very, very shortly after this, the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, and very, very shortly before this, we have the Super Showdown pay-per-view. When it comes to pay-per-views being this close, you get a lot of rematches. But The Fiend can't face Goldberg because Goldberg has a very similar exercise regime to The Undertaker. And if he gets a conclusive victory, The Fiend's not going to want to face Goldberg again because job done. So why not face John Cena?
So you're thinking maybe Elimination Chamber? Fiend
I'm
versus
thinking
Cena?
maybe Fiend versus Cena at Elimination Chamber, and The Fiend gets another big scalp. That's my theory.
That would be interesting. Let me throw this at you. I've seen this circulating online too. How big of an uproar would it make WWE fans if the WWE pulled a pivot and we got Fiend and Cena at WrestleMania, and then Reigns gets, fed into a different storyline again, playing up everybody, quote unquote, knows it's going to be Reigns versus the Fiend. And I know that we've even talked about on the show that has been the plan for a long time, and more than likely that's going to be the match. But what if it's Cena and Fiend at WrestleMania?
The problem from my point of view on this one is that Cena is not actually a bigger draw than Roman Reigns anymore. He's really not. Because he's been away for so long, your modern fan resonates clearly with Roman Reigns at the minute. It could be possible that we would end up with The Fiend versus John Cena, but I think that even though they have history, I think there is more history with Bray Wyatt against Roman Reigns, because Bray Wyatt was set up as Roman's ultimate rival in a similar way to Triple H and The Rock was set up as ultimate rivals, or Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were ultimate rivals, John Cena and Edge, ultimate rivals. They were set up in that way. And when you think back to Wyatt saying, "You but you, Roman," he was essentially saying what so many people in the fan base were thinking at that time and were feeling, and it really resonated with fans and made Bray Wyatt much bigger than he was beforehand. For me, Wyatt needs to sort of play his own demon, which in this case is Roman Reigns. I don't think Cena, who wasn't booked to have a match as far back as December, as close as January, because he wouldn't be going on TV talk shows and talking about trying to get a match if he already had, I don't think he'd want to interject in that. It's not impossible, but I personally do not see it coming, and there is nothing wrong with a predictable match. As long as the story is good, there is nothing wrong with it.
I mean, why don't they just have Roman Reigns face, I don't know, about Baron Corbin at WrestleMania? I mean, wouldn't everybody be down for another Roman Reigns versus Baron Corbin match? Yeah, I mean, why? I mean, they need a sufficient finale and blow off to their feud, so why not Reigns versus Corbin? Have we not seen enough of that yet?
I don't get why this particular feud is still going. They managed to put a bit more life into it with the Usos coming. I know a lot of people are sick of it. I'm pretty sure they're sick of it. A lot of people in that locker room have told me that they are sick of this match. It's just eating up all the time. And the thing is, SmackDown is so formulaic at the minute that we always end on Reigns and Corbin. It surely should have been the end of it, and yet we're still going. Oh, I don't know what it is, but there are so many people in that locker room who are sick of the whole damn thing at this point.
We mentioned the locker room. How does Fox feel about it? We know that Fox, the shows have gotten lower ratings than I'm sure what they have expected. We've seen, a lot of people seem to think that was the reason that Eric Bischoff got fired way back when, was because the ratings were so low and weren't where they want. Fox supposedly, reportedly, we're told that they were going to be the flagship show, and I think that does play into the fact that, like I mentioned, that you got guys like John Cena and Goldberg, making their returns on SmackDown as opposed which you would probably usually see them on, the Monday Night Raw broadcast when Fox was, also on the USA, when SmackDown was also on the USA Network. Usually those big return segments and those big buzzworthy situations occurred on Monday night, not on SmackDown. Now SmackDown is on Fox, and so we've seen a little bit of a shift there. But Fox wants to be the flagship show, and they paid a lot of money to be that. How are they feeling right now about really the general, not only the Reigns-Corbin feud, but the ratings and maybe some of the things that WWE is trying to do to get those ratings up and generate some buzz for the blue brand? How does Fox view the current creative direction over on SmackDown?
Well, I was reporting when Bischoff told that a large part of why he left was, according to contacting Fox rather than contacting WWE, just to make that clear, was that he simply wasn't keeping promises that he had made. To my knowledge, the expectation when it came to ratings, the first show had like a 4 million viewership. To my knowledge, the expectation when it came to ratings was about 2.8 to 3. That's what they were thinking, that's what they were looking at, that's what their projections were. It has not reached that level. It is in fact extremely close, rating at a 2.4 or 2.5. And not only that, but the opinion of the show isn't particularly strong when it comes to the viewership. A lot of people view NXT more highly. A lot of people view Raw more highly since Paul Heyman came in. So there is a knock that they're not getting what they paid for. It's not the flagship. Some of that comes down to the fact that Edge returned for Raw. So you have the big moment like that. And then it's stuff like, where are you expecting the next legend to appear, the next Undertaker appearance, the next Triple H appearance? I do feel there is a bit of appeasement going on with Goldberg, with Cena, and of course with the Universal Championship moving over, which at the time felt like the more important championship because of links to Brock Lesnar. But they were given Lesnar. Lesnar was taken away. There are a number of people at Fox who have some concerns about the ratings at the moment.
It'll be interesting to see, what if they continue to do some of these types of things and returns and maybe get those ratings up. Obviously, Cena returning was big news this week, so we'll see if maybe that's the start of something big, especially heading into WrestleMania, and then where we go from there. And surely to goodness, this week's Reigns steel cage match has got to be the end of this feud. And maybe Fox needs to send some executives down there backstage and tell them, if this wasn't going to be the end of the feud, this is the end of the feud. We're making the executive decision that this is the last time we'll see Reigns and Corbin in a ring together for a while.
Is it the last? Is it the steel cage match this week on SmackDown, or is it the steel cage match at Super Showdown?
I thought it was SmackDown, but maybe I misspoke. Maybe it's Super. I thought it was on SmackDown this week.
Well, this is the thing. We just spoke about rematches being a thing that happened at like a Saudi Arabia or an Elimination Chamber. We know both of these men are going to be in the Elimination Chamber. So I suspect they're just going to keep it going until at least then. I know.
Well, we hope...
I want to make it clear that I'm a fan of both of these men. I'm just tired of a story that's been going now for 5 months.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm fine with, like I said, I think Corbin is the best heel and maybe even could be one of the bigger faces somewhere down the road just because he has charisma. We talked last week about, some of his YouTube videos and Twitter's grilling meat and how entertaining those are. Yeah, just, because he just has charisma. So, yeah, it's not that these two guys are necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just there's only so much we can take. And I know that one of the complaints of fans, even from, I'm sounding like an old fogey here, but from my generation has been that, you don't get those long, drawn out storylines like you did back in the 80s and 90s. But like you said, the story still has to be good. You can't make a feud last 6 months for the sake of having it last 6 months. There has to be something there that keeps it fresh. And I think this one has about run its course.
Just about, yeah. Maybe slightly.
Well, we certainly hope that you don't think we've run our course here at the Dropkick Discussions. We appreciate you tuning in again this week. And when I mentioned that, Tom and I had an idea to try to get some of you listeners involved in the show itself. When you listen to this week's episode over on the Sportskeeda YouTube channel, if you would like to comment in the comments section about a news topic, a rumor, something you've heard online that you would like Tom to comment on and for us to talk about here on the show, leave us a comment in the comments section and let us know what you'd like to hear about. What would you like to hear us chat? I said, is there a rumor here, Tom, either confirm or debunk? Put a comment in the YouTube comment section. You could even tweet Tom and I on Twitter at our own personal handles. Tom is at Colohue. I'm at Korey Gunz. Or you could tweet the DiSKussions Twitter handle as well. Send us those questions, and we're going to try and take a few and put those into the show next week. Kind of a Dropkick Discussions mailbag, Tom, with our fans and try to answer some listener questions next week.
Yeah, I'll put a couple of tweets out as well, try and get some questions going. We want to make sure we're answering the questions and the news topics that you, the listener, are really interested in. We want to make sure we're not just taking up air or anything like that. And obviously, because we do this once a week, we're not everything. So if there's something like a burning topic you want to see discussed, we usually go on what we think are the most interesting topics for ourselves. But if there's something you want to hear, you let us know.
Absolutely. So make sure that you subscribe to the Sportskeeda YouTube channel. Leave us a comment in the comment box. Give us a like. Share it with your friends on your Twitter accounts and your social media accounts. It was doing very well, and so we owe all of that to everyone that listens to us each week. And so Tom and I will continue to bring you all of the news and happenings around the wrestling world right here on Dropkick Discussions. And we appreciate you listening to us again this week. For Tom and I, we will see you guys next week on Dropkick Discussions presented by Sportskeeda.